you can see. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Perfect, that's great, thank you very much. So I just sort of wanted to do a round of introductions for the speakers. We've got so many people on the line already. If you want to pop in the chat where you're from and what your role is, I think it'll be really interesting to see the different groups of people that we've got here today. We've got some really fantastic speakers. You'll be glad you haven't got my voice for the whole hour. We've got Tony Collier here, Lucy Tompkins and Georgina as well. So if I just go round you three initially, just so you can introduce yourselves, and then we'll move on to the first speaker. So Tony, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tony Collier. I'm a Greater Manchester cancer patient treated at the Christie. I'm also patient representative for Prehab for Cancer in Greater Manchester, as well as the Embrace GM programme. And my big passion for cancer patients is basically around personalised care and the value of exercise.
Thanks very much, Tony. Lucy?
Hi, I'm Lucy Tompkins. I am one of the Macmillan Cancer Care Coordinators for Eccles and Earlham PCM.
Thank you. And Georgina?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Georgina McNulty and I'm the PCM Manager for Eccles and Earlham PCM.
Perfect, thanks very much. So I think we're going to crack straight on because we've got a lot of content to go through today. We'll be asking questions throughout, so we'll sort of pause at relevant moments. So if you can pop up your hand there at those moments, that'll be fantastic, and we'll go through as many questions as we can. So I'll just move the slides on. There we go. Tony, over to you.
Yeah, as I said, I'm Tony. I'm patient rep for Greater Manchester Cancer. The Prehab for Cancer programme. There's a missing 4 in the middle of there. I didn't spot that. And I'm really passionate about the value of exercise. For me, it's all about taking control, and I'll come on to that in a bit more detail. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about my view of what the cancer care workers are doing, and talk a little bit about personalised care. Because I think the biggest advancement in cancer care for cancer patients is personalised care. And we're going to hear those buzzwords, I think, an awful lot more. So I am going to talk a little bit about personalised care and what that means to me, as well as my views on the cancer care workers. Next slide, please. So a little bit about my story. Back in 2017, I was ultra fit, training to take on one of the world's toughest ultramarathons. Developed a groin strain around the February time, and the race that I was doing was going to be in the June. I realised that the pain was becoming more and more intense from this alleged groin strain, and so I saw a sports injuries doctor, had an MRI scan. He spotted something untoward, and it later turned out to be diagnosed as advanced stage prostate cancer. I'd had no symptoms at all until the groin strain, and I think I'd had the cancer developing for 10 years, from the age of 50 through to the age of 60. My worst case prognosis was 2 years, which was terrifying. At the time, I had a 3-year-old grandson who I doted on. He dotes on me. And the thought of never seeing him become a teenager was just overwhelming. I hadn't been able to walk my daughter down the aisle at that point, but thankfully I did last August, which was a wonderful, wonderful day. I'm very lucky in the fact that I've been kept alive to date by drugs developed here in the UK. Those drugs are still not available on the NHS, which is one of the healthcare inequalities that I'll be talking about at the Greater Manchester Cancer Conference next week. But they've worked like a wonder for me, and I'm still here 5.5 years after my original diagnosis. And for me, when I was diagnosed with cancer, the biggest thing I wanted to do was to take control of the cancer rather than be controlled by it. And for me, that was via exercise. And so that's why I'm so passionate about the value of exercise for everybody, but in particular for cancer patients. So next slide, please. And so when I researched what personalised care looked like, these are the key words that I came up with. And in my own case, I mentioned control, but I think all those things are things that we should strive for. And I think the reality is that the cancer care workers are actually helping us to achieve all of these. What's really great about Greater Manchester Cancer is that patients like myself do have a voice, which is why I'm here speaking to you today. And we are looking at sort of shifting power so that people who are living with and beyond cancer are basically empowered to take control of their own cancer care and cancer treatments. But I do think the cancer care workers play a really vital role in enabling us to have personalised care and satisfy all these keywords. Next slide, please. And so onto cancer support workers. I asked the question, who is our cancer champion when we can't be? At the moment, I'm relatively fit and well, but there'll come a time when I'm going to really struggle because the cancer will advance. And I don't think it's actually fair that the role of my cancer champion will fall upon my wife. So I think the cancer support workers can be our cancer champions when we need it most. Most importantly, I think the cancer support workers are brilliant as a single point of contact. They're basically our navigator through the storm of a cancer diagnosis. And so a really valuable role that's going to help cancer patients like me enormously. Talk about cancer care reviews, because that's a really important part of the cancer support worker's role. My experience when I was diagnosed, I was given a great big wad of booklets, loads of paperwork, one of which was a cancer care review. I had absolutely a real sort of a problem about completing it. It just didn't feel right. My head was all over the place. I've been told I got incurable cancer. I've been told I might only have 2 years to live. And filling a flipping form in just wasn't for me. You know, it just wasn't going to happen. But actually, more importantly, it never happened because nobody chased it. And I think we can do better than that. We need to make cancer care reviews more than just a tick box exercise. We need to make sure that they are used for the reason that they were supposed to be used. Matching the patient's needs, signposting patients and supporting patients, and working out basically what patients need when they're newly diagnosed. That's the time we're at our most vulnerable, and it's the time where we need the most support. And that's where I think the cancer care workers can actually really support patients enormously. I also think it's vital that we connect primary care and secondary care. At the moment, we have this really strange system where primary care don't talk to secondary care. They don't have systems that are joined up. But thankfully, the cancer support workers actually do that connection. And that for me is really important. I find it slightly bizarre that my oncologist has to send me a letter every time he sees me and then send a letter to the doctor. It just seems a bit bizarre that the systems don't talk to each other. But at least for the time being, until the systems do talk to each other, we have the cancer support workers there connecting primary and secondary care. For me, that's a really vital role. And I think that's the end of my slides.
Thank you very much, Tony. Sorry, just unmuting myself there. That was a really excellent presentation there. So thank you very much for your time and thank you for coming today. And I hope that's really set the scene for everyone for the oncoming presentation, really. I think it's really important just to start off with, we use the terms cancer support worker and cancer care coordinator quite interchangeably. I'd just like to sort of reiterate to everyone that cancer support worker is the umbrella term for all cancer support workers, so cancer navigators, care coordinators, etc. But we're particularly piloting the role of a cancer support worker, but particularly a cancer care coordinator. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone. I'm just going to move on now, if that's okay, and I'll take some questions at the end of my presentation. Lovely. So just a quick overview of what we're going to be going through today. So it's the background and aims behind the cancer support worker pilot, what the cancer care coordinator role itself is, the training and education that we've given the cancer care coordinators to support them in their roles, what are the outputs of the pilot, and also we've obviously got Lucy Tompkins here to give her perspective of what it's like to be a cancer care coordinator in her role, and a perspective from one of the PCN leads, Georgina McNulty. So in response to the long-term ambitions to deliver more person-centred care and support the delivery of the NHS comprehensive model of personalised care for cancer, Greater Manchester previously successfully piloted the role of the cancer support worker in secondary care. However, the increasing number of cancer patients has led to an increase in the number of people requiring follow-up, monitoring and management. So to address this capacity Additional capacity is required to implement the standard of care for all patients. And this project is therefore piloting the role of the Cancer Care Coordinator, which, as Tony alluded to before, is a boundary spanning role between primary and secondary care, and they sit within primary care networks across Greater Manchester. So it's an 18-month pilot, which was initiated in April and aims to bridge the gap between primary and secondary care and create greater links between community care as well. And also, obviously, growing our workforce in a priority area. This is also a really exciting time to pilot a boundary spanning role too, as we come together in system-wide working to form Greater Manchester Integrated Care. So what are the core benefits of this pilot then? So we are supporting that one workforce model for providing seamless personalised care for patients, supporting the QoF indicator data collection in primary care networks, and the Cancer Care Coordinator is also supporting the patient through face-to-face phone calls and face-to-face contact and through phone calls, offering that support and advice and increasing the number of cancer care reviews and reducing that variation between the cancer care reviews as well, and then obviously contributing to the long-term plan. So I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the pilot already, recognise quite a few names on the call already. But for those of you who aren't, the Cancer Care Coordinator aims to provide that seamless personalised care and to be that single point of contact for patients and relatives throughout their cancer journey. So their role is to link in with GPs within their PCN and to conduct cancer care reviews within 6 to 12 months after a patient has been diagnosed with a cancer diagnosis. Now, you might be asking yourselves at this point, now what on earth is a cancer care review? Well, a cancer care review is a holistic conversation between a patient and a cancer care coordinator about their cancer journey that they've been on. A cancer care review can help patients to talk about their cancer experience and their concerns, and then they can support that patient to live well and beyond throughout their diagnosis and have supportive conversations and be able to signpost patients to those relevant services such as social prescribing link workers or Macmillan. This in turn then relieves appointments from GPs and CNSs and other healthcare professionals, as cancer care coordinators are trained to have those supportive conversations and also assisting PCNs and GPs to improve their screening uptake as well. So where are we up to so far? Well, we've successfully recruited all 9 cancer care coordinators, and they are in the regions that you see on the screen. So we have 2 in Bury, we've got 1 in Oldham, 2 in Salford, 2 in Tameside and 2 in Stockport as well. So the cancer care coordinators have been in various roles before they've come into this role, and therefore it was really essential that we offered them that baseline training to ensure that they felt confident and competent, having those supportive conversations with patients and obviously conducting cancer care reviews. So a training and education day was delivered on the 4th of July as part of the induction package that we offered. And feedback, as you can see from the 2 bar charts there, has been really positive. 100% of the respondents felt that the subjects were covered at the right level for them. And then confidence levels prior to training were 50% and they increased to 70% post-training, which is fantastic. The Maguire Communication Skills Unit have completed 2 additional training sessions with the cancer care coordinators to ensure that they have the skills to provide supportive conversations. And the cancer care coordinators have also completed some mandatory training as well, such as the David O'Halloran webinars, LGBT training, and they will be completing the Making Every Contact Count as well training. We are really privileged in Greater Manchester as well to be leading on producing the education and training framework for cancer support workers. The standardised education programme will be released next year, and this is linked in with the Ascend programme, which is coming out of HEE, which I will go on to shortly. I'm just going to stop there for a quick drink, if that's okay. So you might be asking yourself, what's the impact to date? We've got quite a lot of data, so I apologise. This section does have quite a lot of data and graphs going on, but it's all really important data that I wanted to share with you that's come out of the pilot so far. But what is the impact to date? So we released our Q1 report, and if you'd like further information on this, or whether you'd like to see the report itself, you can find it on the Greater Manchester Cancer website. We continue to monitor the progress throughout the pilot as well through monthly PCN steering group meetings to discuss how the PCNs are progressing with the pilot. And this is a really good opportunity for that shared learning, shared successes, challenges. And there's also, just the same, a bi-monthly Cancer Care Coordinator Forum, which again helps the Cancer Care Coordinators link in with each other and again share that successes and challenges with each other as well. And it's really important that we plan for the future. So what's going to happen after the pilot? So we've asked all the PCNs to include the Cancer Care Coordinator role in their workforce planning, which obviously links in with the additional roles reimbursement scheme as well. So throughout the pilot, there are a number of outputs that we need to be recording to make sure that we're supporting the Cancer Care Coordinators in their role. This arrow shows the total number of Cancer Care Coordinators and Cancer Care reviews the Cancer Care Coordinators have completed from July to September. It's quite a tongue twister saying that continuously, so forgive me. So far, I think you'll agree that the Cancer Care Coordinators have had a fantastic impact. Just in August alone, that was probably their first month properly settled into their roles. And I think it's worth mentioning as well that these cancer care reviews were previously conducted by GPs, CNSs or other healthcare professionals. So this is time that we're really alleviating from them, that the Cancer Care Coordinators can do, and they have the time to deliver those supportive conversations as well with the patients. You'll also notice on the right as well, the average time taken to conduct a cancer care review has increased from just under 19 minutes to 22 minutes from August to September. It's suggested that a good cancer care review should last on average about 20 minutes. This has therefore been met by our Cancer Care Coordinators, who have increased their mean time conducting a cancer care review by 3 minutes. Perhaps they're becoming more confident conducting cancer care reviews. It's difficult to draw conclusions just from 2 months alone. However, this data is really, really positive and definitely going in the right direction. So far from the results, we've seen the majority of cancer care reviews have been conducted over the telephone. This is from feedback that we've had from patients. Patients will conduct a patient feedback survey about 2 weeks after they've had a cancer care review. You can see that the majority have been conducted over the telephone and 22% have been conducted face-to-face. And I think we'll be working with PCNs and Cancer Care Coordinators in the future to improve these face-to-face reviews. But I think it's a really good indication. The bar chart on the right demonstrates all the different resources patients have been signposted to. When patients were asked if they wanted different sources of information, Macmillan Support was obviously a really popular choice there. Patients have also been referred to cancer support groups, local support groups as well. So it's really, really positive that they've been getting into different community services as well. When patients were asked, did the Cancer Care Coordinator explain things in a way that you could understand? Over 90% of patients said yes, definitely, and just under 10% said yes to some extent. And overall, how satisfied were you with your Cancer Care Coordinator? 86% said very satisfied, 14% said fairly satisfied, and we haven't had any dissatisfied results. So this is a really small summary of the results, however, hopefully demonstrates the really positive impact that we've had from the Cancer Care Coordinators as well. And this is from 73 patients as well, completing the patient feedback survey. So I just wanted to draw on additional outcomes as well from the pilot. Different things that we've been linking in with. So throughout the pilot, we've had some great system engagement and throughout both cancer support worker pilots and Greater Manchester Cancer, there's been a recognised need for cancer support workers networking across Greater Manchester and demonstrating that boundary spanning working. And the Cancer Support Worker Forum has been set up as a method for all cancer support workers across primary, secondary and community care to link in with each other. The meetings are a really good opportunity to support one another, share best practice and also update or disseminate national pieces of work. In addition to the cancer care reviews, the coordinators in Bury are getting involved in the Cancer Inequalities Action Plan. Some of the key milestones they are focusing on including scoping and implementing initiatives to increase lower GI referrals and improving the communications pathways into secondary care, resulting in better system engagement. Cancer care coordinators are also getting involved in creating posters and improving notice board displays and practices to promote screening and awareness of different types of cancer. But I believe Lucy's going to talk about that later as well. And as part of the pilot, we've been linking with national pieces of work such as Ascend. The cancer support workforce roles have been recognised both nationally and locally as best practice in reaching innovative solutions to support the cancer workforce and improve patient experience. And the exponential growth of the workforce requires investment in training, education and the development of a career framework to encourage recruitment and retention. So there are really clear routes for progression, routes into the profession and routes for progression. The project team have been linking in with all three work streams on the right hand side, and I think this is a really good example of where we've demonstrated joint working and shared learning as well. So you'd be pleased to hear that's the end of my voice now for this section. So I'm more than happy to take any questions at all that you might have. We'll just have a bit of a pause. Just that was a lot of information that I've just given you there. So please, I'm more than happy to accept any questions you might have on the pilot. Helen.
Great work, Louise, and it's good to see those numbers of cancer care reviews going up so quickly. I just want to ask, in terms of the written format for the patient when they've had a cancer care review, is it like a care plan? Do you know the written, kind of like the signposting, the discussions that's been held? Does the patient get a written copy?
That's a really good question, Helen. I'm not 100% sure. I'm just wondering whether whether Georgina, would you be able to support me with this question as to whether the patients do get a written copy, just because I'm not in the PCN itself?
I'm going to defer to Lucy on this because Lucy's the one who's doing it. I think it will probably be on a case-by-case basis. Is that right, Lucy?
So we don't have a care plan template as such. Obviously we go through and add it all onto the notes. But I have had cancer care reviews in the past where what I've done is if it's been over the phone, I've sent information out in the post to patients or via text. Whether that's numbers for, say, Macmillan or a Salford prostate cancer support group, I've sent the leaflet out to a patient that was interested in that. So it's kind of depending on what the outcome of the review is, really.
I'm just thinking in terms of in line with the care plan process. So all the kind of like, the evidence base behind it and the recovery package, now known as personalised care, was to ensure that the patient had a supportive conversation, signpost, but a written care plan. And I think the same principles would apply really, wouldn't it? Because we're given a lot of information sometimes to enable people to empower. So whether it's written down, from the primary care subgroup, I'm fairly certain that Steve Churchill was suggesting the use of the Macmillan Concerns Checklist, which has that care planning facility. It was not known as a care plan, it's a cancer care review. So maybe just something to explore with Steve Churchill.
No, thanks very much for that, Helen. That's really something to look into. Sorry, Georgina, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just to add to that, I'm just mindful that Dr. Anderson isn't with us today, so it might be something that perhaps our GPs might be able to enlighten us more on as well, because obviously there's the conversation that they're having with the cancer care coordinators, but there's also the clinical conversation that they're having with the GPs, but I think it's something for us to take away and have a look at. Thanks
very much, Helen. Looks looks like we haven't got any more hands up, so I'm going to move on to Lucy, if that's okay, Lucy. I'll move the slides on for you. Just let me know if I'm a bit slow. So yeah, take it away. Let me just move the slides on first of all. That'll be helpful.
Yeah, so as I introduced myself before, my name's Lucy. I'm one of the Macmillan Cancer Care Coordinators, and I work across Eccles and Earlham PCM. And so just a bit about me, that's just kind of like the qualifications I had before coming into the role. So I've got a real passion about science and cancer, and particularly genetics, but also wanted a role that was more patient-centered, you know, with patient contact being a big part of that. So I thought this role came along and it was a perfect opportunity to combine both of those interests for me, and try and make a real difference for the patients themselves. So I know Louise has gone a bit into the role already, but a major part of our role is obviously conducting these cancer care reviews. So we make sure that all eligible patients are sent a letter that has a lot of information on it to provide that provision of information about services available in primary care. That's done about 3 months post-diagnosis. We know that patients are obviously getting a lot of information from secondary care early on in the diagnosis. So we want to come in and offer them support and information, but we don't want to, you know, overwhelm them or overload them with loads of information and telephone calls and face-to-face reviews. So we send them information out. It also has mine and my colleague Amy's details on it so that they can ring us if they need, if they need some support. And then we send out, then we try and conduct a cancer care review within 12 months of diagnosis. This is a full review over the phone or face-to-face, whatever the patient's preference is. So this goes over any concerns, any needs, anything they might need extra support with. We're non-clinical, but obviously we can pass any clinical concerns on, but, it'd be dealing with anything if they've got issues with finance or debt or want access to support groups, we help find them that information and pass it on to the right people. So we also wanted to be a first point of contact for patients. So as soon as a patient is placed onto a suspected cancer pathway, a letter is sent out from the GPs and that has our details on it, so that they can contact us if they need any support from the initial referral to secondary care for testing, further testing for suspected cancer. So like Louise said, a big part is raising awareness of different types of cancers. So some of the pictures on there are examples of a Facebook post that I've done on our PCM page, or the bottom picture is an example of a display board that we've done in one of our GP practices. So our aim is to try and make as many people aware of the different signs and symptoms of cancers, and if they've got any concerns, any symptoms, to go and see their GP and try improve that early detection cancer rates. It also links in with cancer screening. So as well as all the display boards, the posts, everything like that, we're working with practices to proactively contact patients that haven't turned up for screening or not responded to screening invites, to really try and improve those screening rates across our PCN, making patients aware how important screening is, and actually what happens during screening processes to remove any of that stigma related to going for a mammogram or a cervical screening. So one of our aims is to try and improve those screening rates. And obviously our role is massive on personalised care. So we've linked into secondary care and other support networks. So we've made really good links with the Macmillan support and information team at Salford Royal, also the acute oncology nurses at Salford Royal, and other support networks based around Salford. We've also created a little referral form for people to use to send patients to us. So if they know a patient's registered at GP we work for, any healthcare professional across any kind of domain in secondary or primary care can send us that. So we'll contact the patient then. We can refer directly to Macmillan at Salford, like I've said. We can also refer to social prescribing. So that means that patients are getting, localised services for them, so they're not getting all just national helplines, even though they are really useful. They're getting a lot more local services available for them. We can also refer within our primary care network. So say if a patient is during the review mentions concerns about their medication, we might refer them to the pharmacist to maybe they complete a medication review with them. Same if we have any clinical concerns that a patient's raised during with us in any reviews, that we could pass that on to a GP or a nurse or anyone whoever is relevant, and make sure that those patients are getting support with the clinical needs as well. So just going to give a short patient example of how I think that this role's been really beneficial so far. So a patient had been referred on a 2-week wait pathway for a suspected cancer. There'd been a mix-up with the hospital, so I chased the appointment with the hospital and then contacted the patient just to make sure they were aware, because I didn't want any further delay to this appointment. And actually what I thought was going to be a 30-second conversation turned into quite a lengthy conversation with the patient. They really weren't sure whether they wanted to go for this further testing. They had a previous diagnosis of cancer a few years ago, and they felt really unsupported by both secondary and primary care when they had this previous cancer diagnosis. So during this conversation, I ended up offering them if they wanted me to refer them to Macmillan, to Salford Royal, the Macmillan Information Centre, just to go over this further and also have a conversation with maybe a clinical nurse specialist about what to expect. They agreed, so I contacted Macmillan and they got back to me to let me know that the patient had discussed it both with their emotional support team and also their clinical nurse specialist, and they decided to go ahead with their appointment. Ironically enough, when the appointment came around, the patient actually had COVID, so they rang me because they couldn't get through to the hospital to let them know they wouldn't be able to attend. So I told the patient not to worry, I'll contact the hospital, let them know, you know, the circumstances and make sure they get another appointment arranged for you. So I think that's just shown that patients obviously weren't expecting a phone call from me. And actually they've been able to fully discuss their concerns and their worries about having this further testing and these further consultations at the hospital. They've worked it through and they've decided the best thing for them is to go ahead with it. But they've also built a relationship with me enough to ring me when they couldn't get through to the hospital and trust that I would sort that they weren't going to miss their appointment and they weren't going to get discharged for not attending. So I think it just shows that even those little conversations with patients can be really beneficial in the long run. And that's it, really.
You can't play it down by, oh, that's it, really. That's absolutely fantastic, Lucy. What a great example to use as well. Oh, look, you've got some round of applause coming in as well. That is absolutely excellent. Perfect example of where you've shown personalised care, patient-centred care. And yeah, no, thank you very much for sharing your story with us today. Has anybody got any questions for Lucy? I think we've got time for just one question. Tony, he's straight in there. Tony, take it away.
Yeah, thanks. And that was a great presentation, Lucy. And it fills me full of joy to see things like this happening in Greater Manchester, and it really is personalised care. So that's great. Well done. You said that you send information out within 3 months, and that I think is about right, because I wasn't taking anything in the first, well, probably for the first year or so. But then you said you actually do the care reviews within 12 months. Is there a target to do that quicker? Because I think that support for me would have been probably right after about 6 months.
Yeah, so what we do is on the letter we send out at 3 months, we ask the patient if they wish to have a full review, to contact us and book in with ourselves. So it gives it back to the patient then. If they're ready at 3 months, they might want to ring us and have a review. If not, they've got our details for a later date. What we tend to do is maybe after another few months, we'll take it on a case-by-case basis again. If they're still undergoing loads of treatment, etc., at the hospital, quite intensive treatment, we might leave them kind of, or send another text saying if they need support, they can contact us. And if they're on a different pathway, maybe they've their treatment's over, they're kind of coming out of it, or they've gone onto a palliative pathway, we might contact them again sooner to see if they'd like a review at a sooner date. It's like the QOF standard is to do it within 12 months, but it can be done at any point before that.
Perfectly answered, Lucy. I've got nothing else to add to that. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. So, Georgina, I'm going to move on to you, if that's okay. And then we'll open up for questions at the end and hopefully a bit of a discussion. So, yeah.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you, everyone. I think the presentations so far are really tough to follow, and I've probably got the worst slot going last here. But I think the points that have been made so far really get across the value of this role for the patients, but hopefully I'll give you a bit of an overview of why it's important to the networks as well. So obviously I've been invited, and the title of my presentation is the value of the cancer care coordinator. So just to tell you a bit about my experience and the staff that I work with. So I cover Eccles and Earlham Primary Care Network, and for those of you who don't know, just a bit of background, we are a 7-practice network, and we have between 70 and 80,000 patients. So we've been involved in this pilot from the beginning, and we've been really fortunate that we've not only just got Lucy as a cancer care coordinator in our PCN, but we've also got Amy as well, who I think is on the call somewhere. So why did we choose to take part in this pilot? Well, from my perspective, it was a bit of a no-brainer, really. We were being offered the opportunity of a free resource at no cost to the network that was going to help both staff and patients, and then more specific support for them, really. One of the other things as well was at the time that we were offered this, we were just coming out of that period that's been really awful for us all with COVID. And I think everyone knows, it's well known in the press, that particular care for cancer patients wasn't as good as it could have been prior to COVID coming along. So I think it was an opportunity for us as a network to reinvigorate those pathways and make sure that our patients got the best care that they possibly could, like COVID hadn't happened. I think as well, what Lucy and Amy are able to bring is, whilst all our primary care staff are fantastic, their roles aren't specific to cancer. It is general practice. So they're there to support and cover everything. So to have 2 dedicated members of staff that are solely there to support cancer patients was just an amazing opportunity for us. And then finally on this, I've put learning and development. So it is an 18-month pilot. And I think we all know that there are things that are going to go well and perhaps things that aren't going to go so well. But it was an opportunity for us as a PCN to have a go of it and see what does work and how we can improve for the future. Next slide, please, Louise. Thank you. So what difference are the cancer care coordinators making to our PCN? So I think, as we said on the other presentations, it's quite obvious a lot of the difference that they're making for those patients. But from a staffing perspective, it is relieving a huge amount of pressure on our already overworked and struggling workforce that we have. So obviously you've seen the increment in those cancer care reviews, and historically they would have just been done by our clinical staff. So I think the fact that we've now got Amy and Lucy there as well to support with that is relieving that pressure and workload for them. And obviously, more importantly, it is another layer of support for those patients in question. And again, coming back to those clinical staff, they're fantastic at what they do, but there's varying skill sets. But the cancer care coordinator role offers that more holistic approach that they otherwise wouldn't have got if it had just been a clinical review. The other thing that we're finding is a fresh pair of eyes has been great. So the way that we've approached it in our network is that Lucy and Amy have gone round each of our practices one by one. They've looked at our processes, how we do things, and they've been able to identify places where things are going great and there's certain processes that are really working for the staff and for the patients, and then other practices where perhaps it's not going so great. So it's been an opportunity for us to share that best practice between ourselves so that we've got a consistent approach and that we're optimising the care that we're offering. The next thing that I've put is safety netting, which is absolutely vital. So despite best efforts, inevitably, there will always be people that slip through the net, unfortunately. And having Amy and Lucy there with us just enables another layer of safety netting. They've got that patient contact. If a patient rings them with a concern, and perhaps Amy and Lucy think, you know, not that comfortable with that, they can just go and knock on the door of a doctor and ask the question, whereas ordinarily that might not have been picked up. And obviously we've made it clear from what Lucy said on the other slides that just raising awareness alone, even if they didn't do anything else, the fact that they're able to spend the time doing the things like the displays, the social media, hopefully make a difference for the future to those patients that wouldn't usually come forward. And then finally, what I've put is a positive influence. So I think we've got really lucky with Amy and Lucy, but you will all know that general practice has had a hammering over the past couple of years, and people are exhausted and often feel like it's a thankless job. But I think having Amy and Lucy come in, it's been a breath of fresh air, and everyone feels positive again, and they're seeing something really good that's happening every day. Next slide, please, Louise. So how is the PCN supporting the role? So with Amy and Lucy, we've integrated them into the team, so they are very much part of not only the practice teams, but the PCN team. So they've been welcomed with open arms by all of our practices, and they do come to our PCN meetings as well. So we had an away day last week, which both Amy and Lucy attend, just to make sure that the PCN staff are aware of their role and what it can offer, and vice versa. They have day-to-day management support from myself. We also have a clinical cancer lead in Dr. Anderson, who they can go to for anything. But equally, Amy and Lucy have also took it upon themselves to make sure that there's a clinical lead in each practice, so that there is someone that they can have that day-to-day conversation with at a practice level if they need to. Training and development, so again, there's been lots of that, which has been fantastic. So we've allowed the time for that, and we really support that as well, because we see how that benefits them and us. And then finally, encouragement. So we're already having discussions between ourselves around, you know, what can we do to keep pushing this role forward and producing that evidence. Obviously, it's an 18-month pilot, but ideally we want this to go beyond that, because we're already seeing what a difference it's making. And that's it from me. Thank you, everyone. Any questions?
I think we've stunned them all into silence, Georgina, but I think what I've just popped up on the screen there is some qualitative data we've had from our patients from the patient feedback survey. And I hope you'll agree, I think some of the words are quite meaningful there. So I'm just going to leave them on the screen just for you to take in whilst we take some questions. Suzanne, I think you had your hand up first, but let me know if it was Sati first.
It was Sati, so I'll pass over to Sati.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Suzanne. So my question is around secondary and tertiary care. I'm interested to know how easy it's been for you to place yourself in those contexts and integrate with those teams and access them, and perhaps what the challenges have been. I'm coming from a perspective of understanding that this is a pilot. I'm suspecting that you've probably picked up wider system issues that I'm sure patients experience, and whether we're able to capture any of those system issues that we might be able to influence from this pilot and highlight as things that need to be tackled. So it's just around that. Have you had, what have the challenges been around that?
So I'll come back on that if that's okay, Sati, and Lucy, feel free to add to this, because I can see Lucy smiling because I'm probably thinking of the same example. So there are one of the local hospitals that deals with both screening and treatment. We found it quite difficult to open up those communications between us, which I think begs the question, if we as professionals are having issues, you can appreciate what it's then like for a patient as well. So that, I suppose, is a more negative example, and that's something that, you know, has been a challenge, but actually Lucy has chased that and managed to come up with a solution, so we're in a much better position now. But I think on the whole, otherwise, in terms of that networking with secondary care, you know, we're so much further already than we were a few months ago in terms of just knowing who to go to and how we get that information. Lucy, I don't know if you've got anything else to add.
Yeah, so like you said, we had an issue with a particular service. It's got a little bit easier because now we've got access to GraphNet, which allows us to see when appointments are. Our main issue was not knowing if a patient had been seen on a 2-week wait pathway. And obviously, you know, we don't want to be ringing every patient that's placed on a 2-week wait, you know, to ask if they've been seen. So this access now lets us see if they've got an appointment booked at any Greater Manchester based secondary care place. So that's really helped because that saved us a lot of time and a lot of time chasing people and emailing people and ringing up people. We've linked in really well with a couple like the acute oncology nurses at Salford. We've gone on to a few meetings at Salford Royal to say who we are to people that we might not have necessarily talked to before. So I think that's been really good. We've just gone on every meeting we can possible to kind of say who we are, what we're there for, what we do. So, you know, try and raise awareness of our role in primary care.
I think I think you're doing a tremendous job, and it's a fantastic role. Just be really great to make sure that some of that learning about how we can scale it up and make sure it has the system impact at the end for the benefit of the people that are receiving the services at the end, so they get a better quality of care. It'd be great if we could capture some of that as recommendations at the end. But thank you for that.
That's great. I think that's a really important job, Sati. And as I mentioned before, we're producing quarterly reports, and there'll be a big evaluation at the end where we'll be looking into things like that as well. So look out for that evaluation at the end of the project as well, and hopefully we can review that. Suzanne.
Thanks, Louise. And I think my question's for Georgina. But before I do, I just want to say brilliant presentations, and it was really nice actually hearing everybody's different viewpoints around the value of that role. So I really found that really interesting. I suppose my question is around the sustainability of the role, because you touched on it before, Georgina. And essentially this role comes within the R's funding. And so I don't know if that's the route that you're looking at to try and sustain them beyond that 18 months. And if so, it would just be helpful to understand what are those barriers around accessing that R's funding to sustain these roles, and how confident are you?
It's a good question, and probably one that Sati's interested in the answer on as well, because I work quite closely with Sati on the R's roles. So I guess I don't know if everyone's aware of how the R's roles work across PCNs, but it's a ring-fence pot of money that we can only use on a select number of roles. So the way it's tended to work so far is, because PCNs essentially are a democracy, is we look at where our priorities are. I think certainly from my perspective, and I'm sure that colleagues in the PCN would agree, that the value in these roles, you know, it's not even coming into question for me at this point, given what they've done in a few months. So I would hope that we are in a position to further extend that funding. It depends on what we've already allocated funding to, because we have funding projections up to 2024. And we've just recently, again, don't know if everyone's aware, but there was a letter that was released at the end of September around the R's funding and the roles. So up until now, it's only been clear that the funding is there up until 2024, but they're now saying that we can offer permanent contracts where appropriate to staff. I think the other thing on the care coordinator roles is that within that at the moment, it's just described as a generic role and not a specific one. So it's how we tailor it to be more specific for cancer, and whether that's allowed within the remit of that role, which probably again Sati would be more able to answer than I am on that one.
And do you think, so
Georgina,
to come back with the second one? Oh.
Sorry, I think, Georgina, it's something, you know, that I'd be keen to explore with you. And if it's something that we need to influence upwards and suggest that it should be incorporated, then I'm really happy to support with that, because I can absolutely see the value of it.
Thank you. Suzanne, did you have something else?